Minutes will be made public and posted to our website. So let's start with the minutes of January 20.
I make a motion to move that to the next meeting.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Okay, so let's just go right into superintendent's report and more importantly, right into the budget presentation. I think it's going to be a struggle.
Okay, so sorry. So we're not going to share good news for tonight, though there's lots of good news. We're going to go right into the budget report, the budget presentation. I'll do the first half of it, and Sharon will do the second half of it, and I'm going to project slides so people can follow along. So let me just open that. Okay. So here's our new fancy cover. Every time when we talk about the budget, I like to share the mission and actually take a few minutes to talk about it. Are people able to see that on their screen? Yeah. Okay. So our mission is to ensure that all students are challenged through a wide range of experiences to become engaged, curious learners and problem solvers who effectively communicate, respect diversity, and improve themselves and their community. When we talk about our budget priorities, there are really three things we're focusing on at the highest level. To expand the range of social emotional supports for students and for that matter staff, to address potential impacts from the pandemic, and even as we're likely at the tail end of the pandemic, some of the impacts of it might last for many years, and to ensure equitable access and opportunities for all students. Additionally, there are two other big things going on. Some of you attended the meetings last night and Monday night with the Regional School District Planning Board. So there are ongoing regionalization or collaboration discussions with Southern Berkshire, and there are ongoing collaborations with Richmond. One other thing that I did want to share, and this is sort of unusual, and Sharon and I debated where this should go. We exceeded our amount that we can have in E&D. So this year we returned in aggregate $601,165 to the three towns. And that's broken out as it is in the slide below. So $448,291 to Great Barrington, and then $76,436.93 to both Stockbridge and West Stockbridge, because in that previous year they had the same number of students, so they had the same percentage. Okay, so that's important, because as we look at increases, one might look at these amounts coming off some of those increases. So let me talk about our proposed budget. So I'm very excited. We have a very strong finance subcommittee that's led by Rich, and we actually started meeting in August and September to start working on the budget. And we had dozens of meetings, first looking at things from a programmatic perspective, and then looking at things from a programmatic and financial perspective. I think the budget that we put together is one of the strongest ones we've ever put together. And in really sophisticated people in school districts, you're able to look at their budget, and the budget is just another representation of the values, right? So if you dig into the particular lines and line items and where we're making investments, I think you see a lot about our values. Let me go into some budget changes. So in the elementary school, and this has been a past practice, and I think a smart one, is as different numbers of students move through different grades, we reallocate staff to where there is need. And so in some years we run 4 classes on a grade or 4 sections on a grade, and in other years we run 3 in that grade, depending on what the enrollment looks like. One of the things we're doing or recommending we do this year is to reestablish the early K classroom. That's been a popular program, and the numbers have shifted, so we're able to do that. And then you'll see this come up in all 3 of the schools. We're updating and providing professional development for a new pre-K to 12 math program. So that's happening at the elementary school, it's happening at the middle school, and it's happening at the high school. At the middle school, we continue with the 4 core teams and specials. We've built in additional support for ESL, or English as a second language. And again, we're updating math, professional development, and the actual curriculum. And at the high school, we're recommending a full-time CTE, Career Technical Ed Director, and that's on the level of an assistant principal to manage our 2 Chapter 74 existing Chapter 74 programs and our early childhood program, as well as our existing pathways and emerging pathways. And over the next several years, we hope to grow the 2 Chapter 74 programs to 5 or potentially 6. But we're not going to do it all at once. We're going to do it in a deliberate way. And I think in another meeting I mentioned, as those programs in our admissions process becomes more stabilized, we'll be able to generate some tuition revenue that will offset the cost of this particular role. Additional ESL support, continuing to work on academic redesign for the school day and year, and again, the same is to update and provide professional development for the new pre-K to 12 math program. Things that are going up, right? And lots of things are going up. Health and dental insurance health insurance is going up a little bit, 2.21, and Sharon can speak to that a little more later. No increase in dental, and there are no rate changes for medics. The Berkshire County retirement, which represents folks besides teachers and certified staff, is going up 9.17%. The teachers group and administrators is self-funded. Legal and other insurances in actual plus 10%, so 24.5, 34,493. Transportation, we talked about when you voted on the bus contract. It's almost 30%, 29%, but the impact on the budget is 10%, and that's $134,300. Increase to special education to actuals plus 10% is $99,558. Technology, a slight increase, 1.22 or $4,000. A lot of our technology expenses are being covered by sort of the gaggle of federal grants we're getting. Supplies, text, materials, it's going up $12,600 or 2.72%. And it's stuff around curriculum and materials. Athletics and co-curriculars, an increase of 12.86%, but the dollar amount's not that big. It's $18,050. Facilities and operations, 5.89%, tied to a truck and equipment purchases, $39,800. And utilities, an increase of 3.24% or $21,600. When I look at this, I really credit Steve Soul and the work and that he and then the committee did around the solar panels and the geothermal in the middle school, and then the other solar project that we're part of, because if you're paying your own electricity and heating bills, you really know how those are going through the roof. So we have a nice cushion there. Capital, so we're in payment 14 of 15-year borrowing for the elementary and middle schools. That's exciting and will come up again in the context of a potential high school project. My fantasy would be that as we pay down or pay off the elementary and the middle school, it opens up space to pay for something for the high school. And we hope to hear from the MSBA shortly. Finally, in capital, upgrades to the high school spaces. So many of you have made the argument that while we wait for the MSBA, or even if we do our own thing, we should still continue to invest in the young people that are in the building now. So there's I think $116,000 in this year's budget to do additional upgrades at the high school. And even the small work that happened, and I don't think from a work perspective it was small, but the changes, the common spaces in the back hall, students now have a place to sit and talk to each other, and I think that's good. Budget by department. We'll now look at sort of the schools and what people might call cost centers. You look at this, and the middle school is 17.59, the elementary school is 19.23, the high school is 25.94. The high school is obviously larger than the other buildings. Student services is across all three buildings, technology and food services across all three, and that gets us to a total of 76.33. District-wide and all other, including non-public transportation and all contingency, is 13.31. School committee and administration is 7.94, and facilities and maintenance is 2.42. This is another way of representing it. Obviously, the biggest chunk, the blue chunk, are salary and benefits. And then the next largest are transportation. Okay. And I'm sort of tempted. Would you rather me do questions at the end, or?
Usually we do it at the end.
Okay.
Especially with our technology folks.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to start here? Okay.
So with that background, our expenditures on our gross budget is $31,630,977, or an increase of $1,346,517 at 4.5%. Our gross budget is all of our expenditures, not considering any revenue. When we then take out what we're budgeting for school choice and tuition revenue, we come down to $29,605,997 to the net operating, or $956,399, just slightly higher because there's a little less revenue in that area. As I said, the difference between the gross operating and net operating is the reduction by choice and tuition. So what we do is we fund everything so that from year to year, we can tell exactly what we spend in each category. Then at the end of the year, we reallocate expenses to choice and tuition revolving funds. The choice was increased slightly based on current projections, as well as the tuition was decreased slightly based on current projections. Choice for those students that come to us from any other district in Massachusetts. Tuition are those students that come to us from Richmond and Farmington River. So those projections are based on the number of students they have. Richmond in 8th grade, Farmington River in 6th grade. So it can change after our projections. That's how we set it. Capital budget. As Peter said, there are two parts to our capital budget this year. We have the bond that is in year 14. We reissued the bond 14 years ago. We saved about $1 million for those of you who remember that. So year 14, our principal is $1,655,000 with an interest of $125,125 for a total of $1,781.25. This gets allocated across all three towns in the same way our operating does, based on the number of students in the school. And then we have the $116,000 for high school updates. Those questions Steve could answer better, but basically when we talked about it, those are the things that either are critical and necessary or things that can be mobile so that they can move should we do something with the high school project. So lab equipment or desks, chairs, those kinds of things. Now let's look a little bit at our revenue, where our revenue comes from. So obviously the largest amount comes from our local contribution assessments, and that is 77%. Chapter 70 is about 9%, down from in 2003, it was closer to about 18%. E&D is 1%. Choice and tuition, which we just talked about, is 6%. Chapter 71, which is our transportation reimbursement, is about 3%. And everything else, including interest on investments, Medicaid, miscellaneous tuition, miscellaneous income, which includes rental from Head Start, is 4%. Also, to be specific about our excess and deficiency, it's going to use what was certified from FY21 for FY23, $352,000 for the operating budget, which is level from last year, and $116,000 for the additional capital, so that we fully fund that with our E&D balance, and that represents 31% of our E&D balance. What does it look like for our towns? 3 considerations: the population allocation, which is what we see on the October 1 report, the number of resident students in each of our towns, the minimum local contribution, which is set by the state based on the relative wealth of each community, and then the net assessment we talked about a little bit ago. So as you can see, each year the population allocation can change. Great Barrington lost, excuse me, a few students. They went from about 74.6% of the resident population to 73.5. Stockbridge went from 12.7 to 13.7, and that 1% change in that allocation, you'll see has a big impact on the allocation of the assessment. And West Stockbridge stayed pretty stable from 12.7 to 12.8. Minimum local contribution, this is for all of you who want to check out Mass General Law, Chapter 70, Section 6, talks about the statutory allocation of assessments. So the minimum local contribution, and I do it based on the previous year's budgeted amount. We do our allocations the minimum local contribution based on the governor's budget that comes out in January. Then months later, after the state has settled the state budget for the year, the minimum local can change based on the amount of money that the state funds in Chapter 70. So the minimum local contribution went up about $396,000 for Great Barrington, from $7,300,930 to $7,696,400. Stockbridge went up from $1,260,218 to $1,491,020. They're about 17.7%. West Stockbridge went up from $1,260,218 to $1,310,375. And again, that is based on the foundation budget, what the state says it will be, that a school should be funded at, or a district, and what the towns themselves must contribute to that education. So it comes down, after we look at our net budget, all of our revenue, we come down to our net assessment. For Great Barrington, it's rising about 600,000 from 18,432,398 to 19,093,609. Stockbridge, 3,158,215 to 3,618,974. And West Stockbridge is lower than the other two, going from 3,158,215 to 3,290,66. And then that all comes down to the total assessment. So the total assessment is the net assessment, operating assessment, plus the capital assessment, less the additional revenue, Chapter 70, 71, the MSBA, Medicaid, interest, miscellaneous revenue, and E&D. Great Barrington's increase is 3.59%, 661,211. Stockbridge is 14%, 14.59% of 460,759. And a lot of that is due to the 7% increase in the students. So Stockbridge last year had 101 students. This year they have 108. So it's 7 students, but as a percentage it's high. And the minimum local contribution went up 17.7%, which is what leads to such a high percentage increase. And then West Stockbridge is up 5.08% or 135,851.
Just to interrupt, so at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the money we gave back to the towns this fiscal year. One might say, oh, we gave $448,000, $291 back to Great Barrington. So the real increase isn't the full 6, but it's the 6 less the 448. And similarly, to take the 76 off the top of the other. Should I do the grants? Sure. Yeah. Okay. So even though this isn't part of our budget, it's sorry. Even though these grants aren't part of our operating budget, the grants have increasingly played a larger and larger role in what we're doing. And some of these are entitlement grants, which mean we get them based on demographics or something. And some of them are very competitive grants, which means we spend a lot of time writing them and we beat out other schools or institutions in getting them. So the first two, ESSER 2 and 3, are federal recovery grants, and we've spent a lot of time talking about that. The next one is the 21st Century Grant. That's a competitive grant. Special Education IDEA is an entitlement grant. The BAR grant is the $300,000 around high school redesign. And that was a competitive one. Rural Innovation, so those are 2 combined. SEL and mental health, that was the competitive one. Title I is tied to poverty. The Great Barrington Fund, so that's the revenue from the marijuana income that we get. Rural Sparsity is a state one. There's another IDEA. Skills Capital is a competitive grant at the high school. BUW is Berkshire United Way. Title II is another federal grant. Service Learning and Special Ed Early Childhood are entitlement grants. Perkins is for vocational education. We get additional funding from Berkshire United Way to support our work with Greenagers. Title IV A Remind me, Sharon and Ruth.
That's it's a federal grant for professional development.
Oh, I'm sorry. 4A is a federal grant for professional development. Another early childhood special ed grant. The STARS grant is the Mass Cultural Council. The Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation, through their Fund for Excellence, gave us $4,400. The BCREB is the Regional Employment Board, and MyCap is a grant around graduation stuff. The total for grants this year is $4,023,267, and our best year was like 2 million, right? So it's really almost doubled. And then we still have the Department of Justice grant to use for 2 more years. So I think we'll stop there, and we're happy to respond to questions. We obviously threw a lot at you, and it's technically complicated, but feel free to ask, and we're happy to respond. And let me stop presenting. Okay. So Steve, I imagine you want to start with the committee first, and then other
start committee, and then anyone has questions, then we'll go to the public.
Couple things. One is, so you went through all the grants, and I know those are grants from FY22, but the amounts you showed aren't to be spent all in FY23, correct? Some of those grants go over a number of years.
Correct.
And that's the gross amount of the grant you're showing in that.
We're showing the gross amount of the grant, right? So
Yeah.
the ESSER's over 2 or 3 years. The Department of Justice is over 2 more years.
And some of them, like the Title I is
2 years.
That's 2 years. Okay.
Special education, Title 1, 2, and 4 are over 2 years.
Yeah. And then I would just point out, everyone, I don't know, we said at the beginning, but the actual public hearing is next week.
Yes.
So it's not that like the public couldn't ask questions tonight like they always did, but any like formal comments to be made on the budget, you know, even if made tonight, should be repeated at the public hearing next week.
Questions tonight? You can make a few short comments, but the public hearing is really good time for that.
Yeah.
Other questions?
And also for committee members, like amendments or anything should be after the public hearing.
Any other committee questions on things in the budget?
I have just a question for Sharon. For the change in student enrollment, how many did you say for Stockbridge, and can you tell me what grade range it was like before?
8 for Stockbridge.
7 for Stockbridge. I have to go back to a different report on that, so just need 1 minute. Other questions? Or-
Yeah, well, Sharon's looking that up. Anybody else?
Is the 800,000 that was open to the federal grant part of the $4 million total, or is it additional? So we're looking at an iron.
Almost 5, but we don't want to like double count things.
Yeah, that was covered last year.
It's just such a big amount. It's
Yeah,
worth.
in comparison
worth-
to 2 million in
Yeah.
previous years.
And obviously, like the recovery money is unusual, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when that money dries up, whether there'll be more money or not. And I think it will depend a lot on where the country is and what administration's in charge.
I have the answer to that. I have the answer to that question. Great Barrington decreased by 19 students. Stockbridge is up by 7, and West Stockbridge is down by 1. You're welcome.
Other questions from the committee, either online or in person? If not, anyone in the audience have any questions? Erica, I'm not a co-host anymore, so just help me out here.
Does somebody have their volume on? Because Eric is speaking.
So, I thought you were.
Hi, guys. I think I've
Erica,
been
go
allowed to
ahead.
talk. Thank you. Erica Milkey in Great Barrington. I was just curious about the Department of Justice grant, and I was wondering if that was the same grant that was, I've heard referenced as federal funding that was for like some like ADL training similar. Does that relate to somehow equity in the schools and training for staff around that? Or is that something totally different?
So Erica, it does. So there are two federal Department of Justice grants, and in simplest terms, one is sort of around hardening the schools and one's around softening the schools. So the one that's around hardening is around radios, communication systems, antennas, training, anonymous call systems where a student or parent or family member could call something in and report something, and it could be bullying or a threat, and it goes to a monitored site, and we can respond to it. So that's part of it. And then the other half of the grant, or the second grant, is the part we describe loosely as softening. And that's a place where we've drawn some funds for the work with Stoke around anti-racism and building a stronger sense of community. I think our work with ADL is already funded, so we're not paying separately for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else in the audience have any questions?
I have one more question, actually.
Go ahead.
For the middle, or the elementary, we're putting back the EK, the early K, is that correct?
No.
So is that eligible for all 4-year-olds, or is it just the older 4-year-olds? I don't know if I remember correctly, at the time it was just for kids around older.
February or something like that?
Is there a?
I haven't seen anything about a cutoff, but yeah, I've been told it's the older kids.
Because to me, I mean, when we had to fight to try to get kids from other districts, we were losing kids because some districts had October 1st cutoff, we had September 1st, and they made a marketing strategy, but to me, studies have shown that the older kids typically do better in school. So to give older kids an extra head start, I think it always rubbed me the wrong way in that program. So I guess now is what we're looking at is the right time or not. But I just want to make sure if it's something that, if it's for that year before kindergarten, I'd like to see everyone in that age group be able to go, not just the older kids. If that is still the way it is.
What I'd like to do, if it's okay, is I'd like to refer that to the policy subcommittee to do a little thinking on it. This was a big deal right when I got here, right? Like 12 years ago. And I think historically you're right that we had one date and we moved it, and then we might have moved it again. And I think with a new principal who's worked across other districts, it's worth taking a look at it again and having it be more deliberate. So if it's okay, what I'd like to do is put it on an agenda for a policy subcommittee, have Katie come do a little research on it and see what shift we might want to make. And I don't know that we make a shift except having it for September, or August, but maybe we set up something with broader budget implications for the year after. I know this is frustrating to people because there's always too many people whose kids fall within a week of the thing one way or the other, and And the consequences of that are you get a free, really high quality public opportunity, or you're writing a check for $10,000, $15,000.
It was to the kids who needed it the least, the oldest of that age, or should have been reversed as far as my parcel, I think it was the youngest one, so maybe
Yeah, well, I think,
statistically the weakest are the ones who need more help.
right, and then I think we have to look at it not just in and of itself, but in relation to Head Start and the integrated pre-K.
There is something of, you know, if it was just ran on the same cutoff as the regular school year for kindergartners, I think the historical bad feelings that were generated a long time ago, and I'm not saying that's necessarily going on now, but was because it was this kind of artificial one that created the inequity that Jay's talking about, and then the goalpost moved. I think if you just have what's our date, September 1 or whatever it is for kindergarten now, like how old do you be to go to kindergarten? What's the date for us?
I think it's September 1.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience or school committee members?
Just one other question I have, just on the bump to the athletics budget, is that primarily driven by transportation because of the increased busing fees?
Yeah.
Well, we were requesting to increase that line anyway because of the change in the region that we are participating in. So we knew that we're going to have more out of the Berkshires kind of driving anyway. So most of that was requested prior to the new transportation contract.
But that is all in the transportation line item. Yeah. I want to talk about some of the other line items after the public hearing.
Okay.
The one thing that I would say is that I won't be at the public hearing, but I'd love to talk about Sharon's favorite topic, which is E&D, and how much, if the committee has some desire to bump it up a little bit more. We may not, but I think it's something worth talking about.
I'll give you my sentiment on it. Is I don't feel compelled to go further into E&D based on the projected assessments that were here tonight. I understand there's, Stockbridge is probably not as happy about the assessments as some of the other towns. The problem is what you would have to pull out of E&E to make any meaningful difference in Stockbridge assessment is astronomical. So it just seems foolish. I do have, for me, I kind of try to step away from the finance committee role of preparing an overall budget back to regular school committee mode at this point and start looking at individual line items. I may have some proposals that have increases in individual line items, and if so, I'd be looking to offset them with E&D. But I think that decision's made after if there's some consensus around, and most of it's discrete anyways. But in past years where we've been looking as a E&D just to offset the assessment, I personally don't feel like that's.
No, and I respect your point, and I think I agree with you. But I also think it's important that we bring it up. It's a fairly large sum of money.
And I don't want to dwell on the negative, but now being able to talk about them when we get back to the town is clearly a big positive, and I like the way Peter phrased it, but that should not have happened. So,
Peter,
Hand up again?
Rich, we got 7 new students in Stockbridge. That's $71,000 per student.
Yeah,
That's a college education.
Erica?
In a private
guys.
school.
Oh.
That's crazy.
Sorry, I didn't know if it was appropriate to start talking. Sean, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. I was wondering if you guys could explain a little bit more this E&D. I saw that it was excess and deficiencies. I do have a master's in accounting, but this is not something that, apart from a one-year stint I had working at Ford Motor Company where our assembly plant had a slush fund, basically. I'm wondering if that's the comparable term for this E&D.
No.
Okay. I can't hear anyone right now. Guys, I don't know if anyone is talking, but I can't hear anyone.
Can't hear anybody.
Oh, there we go. I can hear Sean.
Anybody at headquarters can talk?
Okay, Erica, excess and deficiency in a regional school district is exactly parallel to free cash in a town budget.
Okay. And I do attend those town meetings, so that does make sense to me. I'm not sure that everyone listening will get it, but thank you.
Sure.
Sean, why don't you go ahead and repeat what you said earlier?
What's that?
We didn't catch what you said earlier. You can go ahead and repeat it if you want, or you can. Your powder dry.
So I guess I'm kind of flabbergasted. We got 7 new students in Stockbridge. The assessment's up $500,000. So that basically boils down to $71,000 per student. Well, that's when you look at.
No, there's the whole talk about minimum wage.
Not hearing
Like
it.
I said, so it's almost, so out of the 460, 230 is from MLS, and the other 230 is from student. That's why I asked. So if you divide that out by 7 students, that's actually $35,000 per student. That's why I questioned. But if Great Barrington and West Stockbridge had stayed 0, then it would have been questioned. But it's not that we just went up 7. Great Barrington went down 19. West Stockbridge went down 1. So it's almost like we're gaining a lot more than 7 because they went down.
All right, so it's $35,000 a year. That's private school education.
No, it's like whatever 21,000 or whatever our thing is, because as you take a group, it's not just us going up 7. It's Great Barrington and going down 19 and West Stockbridge going down 1. So we're actually going up a lot more than 7 compared to they're going down. I don't know what the exact percentage is.
It's further compounded by what the state has decided we can pay as a town.
Right, it's exactly half and half, almost.
Because they're
exactly.
worth more money than
Yes.
the value.
Both the value of your real estate and the value of your residents' income as represented on their income tax returns from last year has increased dramatically.
Unmute myself.
There you go.
There's one.
What it still boils down to, guys, is our increase was $500,000 and we got 7 new students.
You want to think of it that way, you can. It's really simplistic, all year long. Yes.
So another thing we did, because when I looked at that, Sharon and I both saw that as a large number in 1 year. So we then looked at the 5, 10, and 12-year increase to Stockbridge, and that's a separate report that we can have. Many years, Stockbridge had a negative increase or a negative number. So while the almost 15% in 1 year is very large, over the course of either 5, 7, or 10 years, the increase averages out to be nowhere near that. And can you share those numbers, Sharon? Okay. So just hang on a second while Sharon pulls that up.
I remember one year, we were like -11. So
Right.
it was a real big number.
They're very completely on the bad end of it, and this happens this year or not.
Okay, either we'll share it in a few minutes, or if we can't grab it tonight, we'll share it at the next one.
It's a small number. What small number would be?
You're correct.
A swing of five is a huge percentage.
But in Jason's also, correct, you have to look at it, that if Gregorian stayed the same, it's not, would have had completely different impacts.
So over the average increase to Stockbridge, is like 3.5%, right? So this is the particular outlier year, but over the last 10, 12 years, it's 3.
It might be an outlier year, but it's $500,000 for 7 students.
No.
So let's move on. Obviously, Sean has that opinion, and he has a right to it, but it's a little more complicated than that. Any other budget questions? So let's look at this. Obviously, the technology tonight isn't so terrific. How about is there anything on the agenda that we have to get through?
You want to vote on those policies? There's no urgency to
There's
it.
no urgency to know, Sharon, the transfers matter for another week. So I'm gonna use my prerogative. Yeah, go ahead. Just 2 quick things about COVID. You may.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you may enjoy it.
I'm gonna unmute myself. So I'd just like to share 2 quick updates on COVID, or really 3. So the first one is the numbers are getting better, and the positive pool tests or routine testing are going down, right? So that's a good thing. And the countywide numbers are getting better, and the transmission rate is really going down, which is wonderful. That being said, we're not yet out of the woods on this. The commissioner and governor announced yesterday that the statewide mask mandate will cease to exist on February 28th. I'm not ready tonight, having had that information for, 30 hours, to make a recommendation. And I would like to be very deliberate and spend the next week talking to the 4 school nurses, our local doctors, the boards of health, around what we might do. And I'd like to come back to the committee next week to share those initial thoughts, but knowing that then we're going on vacation. So there's not a huge sense of urgency, though everybody is starting to email me, what are we doing, what are we doing, what are we doing? This is one race that I don't feel we need to win, and it may make a little sense to be deliberate and see what happens in some neighboring communities before we jump to our own decision. There are lots of advantages and disadvantages to different approaches to this, and I'll just come back next week with some really crystallized thinking around that. Is that okay?
That's fine. Before we adjourn, any public comment?
Second.
The unanimous consent, we are adjourned.